Now, let's go back to some of these key moments leading up to where we're at today in Yemen. Starting in 2002, U.S. Special Ops Forces entered Yemen to train their security forces and target al-Qaeda. Then, by 2012, a year after the country's longtime ruler was ousted, President Hadi won a single-candidate election. Now, outraged over lack of representation under the new government, the Shiite Houthi rebels then revolted, pushing the president and government to resign just a few months ago. Now, security has since deteriorated, and the U.S. Embassy and others have been forced to close. The president has fled, and first to Aden, and now yesterday, he's fled the country entirely. Now, Saudi state TV says the president arrived today in the Saudi capital. Now, lots of moving parts to this conflict in Yemen. So joining me now to help break this down are Sama'a Al-Hamdani, a journalist who specializes in Yemeni issues and politics. Also sitting with us today is Musa Al-Gharbi, who is in Tucson. Musa writes about social epistemology. All right, guys, thanks for being with us today. So, Sama'a, I want to start with you. Saudi Arabia is obviously the biggest and the strongest country in the Arab world with so much U.S. backing. They're largely a Sunni population, as are the 9 other countries that are part of the coalition. The Houthis in Yemen are Shiites. Do you believe this is strictly a tribal issue? Is this the reason that the other countries are getting involved?
Well, I don't think it is because of sectarianism as we'd like to portray it in the media. Even though the other countries are largely Sunnah, Sunnism has different sects within it. So the Sunnism that exists in Saudi Arabia is very different from the Sunnism that exists in Morocco, for example. This is about politics, first and foremost. The Houthis are upsetting Saudi Arabia. They are a threat at the border. Their ally at the moment is Iran. And Saudi Arabia was worried about their expansion in Yemen. Like you stated earlier, the president handed in his resignation, fled from Sana'a to Aden, and within the last few days, the Houthi group was able to push all the way into Aden where the president was. When the president fled the country, it seems that overnight Saudi Arabia brought this coalition together and decided to carry out this strike. In my opinion, this strike was a little bit unnecessary. They did not exhaust all means of peace negotiations and so on. The problem with that is in January, when the president handed in his resignation, a lot of countries, a lot of the KSA included, the U.S., they withdrew their embassies, they withdrew their diplomats out of the embassies in Sana'a and did not have anybody on the ground to talk with these people. So it seems that they weren't in touch with them. They offered a dialogue process. They asked the Houthis to participate in a national dialogue in Riyadh. Given the stake that Saudi has in this, it wasn't a surprise that the Houthis refused. I thought before that they would recommend Oman. As you stated earlier, it's the only country that did not participate in this. If they suggested Oman as a negotiation base, the Houthis may have accepted. At the moment in Sana'a, we're getting hit by a lot of strikes as we speak.
And now, Musa, I'd like to go to you in Tucson. Reports are coming out that Egypt may also send troops to fight the Houthis in Yemen, in addition to others signaling a ground war could be in the works. How concerning is this to you?
Yeah, so the reason that Egypt is willing to commit these troops, at least a large part of the reason, because of course Yemen is far outside of their sort of immediate jurisdiction or area of concern, is because the current regime in Egypt, spearheaded by Fattah al-Sisi, is basically being underwritten by Saudi Arabia, and Egypt has one of the most sophisticated armies in the region, so their assistance is useful. It is a concerning development. I would like to elaborate briefly on what the previous speaker just said regarding sectarianism and the extent to which it contributes to this crisis. So the Houthi are Shia, but it's important to note that the Houthi have been in conflict with the government in Yemen for the better part of 10 years now over a number of issues. In fact, it was the Houthi who were spearheading the 2011 uprising against the Yemeni government. And the reason they've been able to push so far down into Yemen is for a couple of reasons. One, about 40 40 to 50% of Yemen's population is Shia, but the Shia aren't a monolith, but most of them have sort of sided with the Houthi. But in addition to that, a number of secessionists from the south have sided with the Houthi, as well as leftist groups, some Sunni groups. So they have a broad amount of support beyond just the Shia population, and the central government in Yemen, in contrast, is not widely loved. President Hadi is not well regarded. The current government, which is an extension of the previous regime, is not well loved. People are hoping for bigger reforms. So it's just important to note.
Okay, now I want to pose the same question to both of you. Sama'a, I'd like to go with you first. Some say that Saudi Arabia has stepped in because this will serve somewhat as a proxy war for the U.S. and Iran. What are your thoughts on that?
So Saudi Arabia is engaged in proxy war with Iran and several other countries in the Middle East at the moment. I think this airstrike taking place in Yemen and led by Saudi Arabia could be misread by Iran as an invitation to also engage in this warfare by supporting the Houthis further. Of course, the Yemeni people on the ground do not want neither Saudi nor Iranian participation in this. This is a Yemeni matter that should be resolved within. And I feel that a lot of Yemenis are looking forward to having peace at any cost at this point. We've had a very bloody week in this past week was extremely bloody. To touch upon what he said earlier, he stated that the Houthis were engaged in warfare with the Yemen's government in the last 10 years, and that is correct. However, the president is also a Zaidi, so it wasn't a sectarian war. They're from the same sect. And right now, the former president who launched several wars against the Houthis is now an ally with the Houthis.
Right. Now, I'd like to give Musa a chance to chime in there. What are your thoughts on that, Musa, real quick? We have just a few moments here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's an important thing to underscore, is that the difference between the Houthi and the government was not religious in nature, but political in nature. And the same is true, for instance, in Iraq and a lot of these other countries which are portrayed in sectarian terms. And briefly, I would like to say that there's a danger sometimes in framing things too much in terms of like the actions of Saudi Arabia or Iran, in that it tends to insinuate that the Yemeni people or the people of whatever country is being discussed don't have a will of their own or interests of their own and aren't pursuing an agenda out of their own volition. Of course, this is the case. There are external players who intervene in a lot of these countries. Often it's not productive, but a lot of these things are driven by indigenous concerns and legitimate indigenous concerns by the people involved.
That's a pretty fair statement, fair assessment. Thank you both for being here. Sama'a Al-Hamdani and Musa Al-Gharbi, thank you for sharing your insights with us, guys.
Thank you.